His son is
has
13.
she has it way easier in so many ways, and like
way
$1,000,000% harder
Yep.
in ways that I can only begin to imagine.
Mm-hmm.
For example, worrying about having to go to school and be murdered
Yeah.
at your desk by a person who is, so among many other things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have a heavy burden, and man, it's our job to just love them 100% through that, and listen to them, learn how to listen to them.
That's key.
Wow.
Sure.
It's old fashioned, but it
Yeah.
works.
It's old fashioned. Well,
it's old fashioned. This whole listening to people.
if you bring back humanity, we're old fashioned.
Yeah.
We're just animals.
Yep.
We need to listen to each other.
Same basic nature.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, we're kind of already getting into some of it, but it seems like what you've probably learned in your field since you started is like to today is like the difference between horse riding and flying to Mars in a rocket ship. It's only been the last 30 or 40. I mean, there's things you're learning now that wasn't even teachable 30, 40 years ago when you started, right?
100% true. 100%
I mean,
true.
it's the evolving. So is it actually really evolving, or do you find yourself applying some of the exact principles that maybe happened 100 years ago? They're still just as relevant now. We're just trying to apply it to this crazy new social media world we live in. I mean, do you know what I mean? Some of the basic foundational psychology. What you brought up Freud earlier, and things like that. Do a lot of those things just actually still totally apply? You just got to sort of amend them, I guess, a little bit.
Man, that's a great point and a great question that I spend a lot of time thinking about, actually, because I think, all this stuff I learned at SBU.
Yeah. I know when you started.
We can reiterate that story later.
From my wonderful professors, and then the stuff that I was spewing out from the lectern and being abused for. I mean, some of that stuff I think has held up, and some of it is like, in many ways, sort of culture and historic zeitgeist, spirit of the times bound. I mean, like it was a product of its time. But I think that's kind of what we're doing in many ways, is sifting through all that and deciding what still obtains, what still pertains to to life today, and a lot of it really still does. I mean, some of it, like Erik Erikson's theory of developmental psychology, like different stages that we go through in terms. I think a lot of that's still 100% relevant. I mean, as I am now in my 50-something, I mean, like getting toward that era of what he would call generativity, and then thinking about life review later on. I mean, I think that stuff, people still are doing those things. Babies are still trying to figure out whether they can trust or mistrust the world. I mean, and all the more reason why we should be building safe spaces for our children, etc. But yeah, I think some of that stuff, just that one as an example, that really is in some ways, I don't want to say timeless because it will change historically, but that stuff is not going to change anytime soon. Some of that's built on basic, human psychology and physiology. I mean, the thing where we first had our interaction was, and that was psychophysiology. That was about the general adaptation syndrome, which is Hans Selye's word for what happens when we're faced with a threat. We have this thing that happens in our sympathetic nervous system, and then our parasympathetic nervous system comes and tries to calm it down or whatever. But for example, stress, that's still 100% relevant, because kids are being threatened, both directly, physically, and psychologically, and obliquely. Sorry, Jody. From all kinds of different angles, with things that really are problematic, that things are threatening to them in many ways for their basic safety and survival. So, all that stuff I think is still very, very relevant. But I think, and science, psychology is a science. There are haters and doubters, but we really do try to pay attention to the scientific method. And if it doesn't hold up over time, then we discard it. We used to think that, but and by the way, that's the self-correcting mechanism called science, and I believe in that very, very strongly. Even though there have a lot of people out there these days who think seem to think they have a better way.
Right.
But
You can equate that to medical too.
100%.
I mean, medical technology has changed over the years, so why not psychology?
Yeah,
it
should.
It's the study. It's not the finished.
Right.
It's still you're still studying it. So.
Are we glad that medicine has evolved from like drilling holes in your skull and relieving the pressure and letting spirits out
With one of those
with the hand drill? You're going to feel better any second now. This is called trephining. You can do it with a Makita now. You can do it a lot faster. But I mean, I'm really glad. I'm really glad that we've evolved beyond that idea, and it's self-corrective in that sense. So the more we learn, the more you know.
Yep.
Tune in live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central
on the Unsung Screamers Facebook page, YouTube channel, and Twitter.
And check out our Unsung Screamers podcast
wherever you get your podcasts.